Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 31st of July 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, plans for BioShock Infinite DLC have been announced. The mighty quest for epic loot rolls back its perceived pay-to-win monetization. Developers react to the self-publishing plans for the Xbox One, and the Humble Deep Silver bundle has appeared. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. The plans for BioShock Infinite's DLC have finally been unveiled with the launch of BioShock Infinite Clash in the Clouds today for $5, as well as the announcement of the forthcoming story-driven two-part DLC, Burial at Sea. The Burial at Sea content will take you back to Rapture prior to its fall into disarray, and will be putting you in the role of both Booker and Elizabeth. The second part of the DLC will allow you to play Elizabeth, and the DLC itself appears to be focused on both exploration of the pre-fall Rapture, as well as a combat system that supposedly takes the best parts of BioShock and BioShock Infinite. It will feature plasmids, as well as big daddies, but also take tears, skylines, and vigors from BioShock Infinite. The first piece of DLC, however, appears to be focused for the most part on arena-based combat. And this $5 pack does not appear to add anything in terms of the actual storyline, and consists for the most part of various weapon-based challenges. These challenges will take place on 4 new maps based on existing locations within the game. Well, the first thing I'd say is Clash in the Clouds looks like a complete waste of time, but it's hardly the only game to have put out something like this. In fact, we saw it with Trials of Dunwall, with Dishonored, and there's plenty of other examples of arena-based stuff. Borderlands has been particularly guilty of this. It's a nice, easy way, I suppose, to create content based on the game that you already have and not really add anything substantial. And some people dig that kind of thing for whatever reason. I'm not entirely sure why, especially with BioShock Infinite. I mean, come on, the combat was the weakest point of that game. I'm not really sure how many people would be interested in that. I'd be somewhat surprised if that were the case. It's kind of a slapdash piece of DLC, really, when you think about it. Take existing assets, build a couple of new maps based on them, and then have you fight stuff in an arena. Yeah, not really the strength of the game, let's be frank. But it is a $5 optional piece of DLC, so it's not really all that important. I think that what everyone's really interested in, let's be frank, is Burial at Sea. There's a short 1-minute trailer that we showed in the background there, and it demonstrates a lot of things that I personally would very much like to see. The idea of going into Rapture prior to its fall is very interesting to me. The idea that the combat might be a little bit better, potentially. I don't know if it will, though. I really don't, because if it takes too many elements from BioShock Infinite, then we might very well just have a similar situation. Oh, it's the same kind of combat as Infinite. You're still limited to 2 weapons. You still don't really have complex hacking. The security systems are quite frankly irrelevant, and so on and so forth. What excites me is that the game might not be that combat-focused. Everything that we see in the trailer indicates that there's a good amount of exploration, interaction, and investigation going on, which interests me greatly. I'm also very intrigued to see where they go with the Elizabeth side of things. Elizabeth is, of course, not a combat-orientated character. Never really has been. Will they take proper advantage of Elizabeth's unique abilities, or will they just turn her into another gunslinger? I really very much hope that they don't. I've made no secret of the fact that I don't think BioShock Infinite is an amazing game, although it was a fantastic story. I do feel that this DLC is an opportunity for them to regain some of what they lost in terms of the gameplay that they streamlined down and the annoying oversimplification of the franchise. I do genuinely believe that in many ways, Infinite was a step back from the original BioShock and not, in fact, a meaningful step forward. This, however, might be an opportunity for that to change, so it looks fairly exciting. The Season Pass is available for $20. It does include Clash in the Clouds, which I would imagine is not really all that important to most people and can probably be safely skipped. We don't know the full price of these DLC packs individually, but the Season Pass is $20 and includes both episodes of Burial at Sea as well as Clash in the Clouds, and an early bird special pack which has like a gold skin for weapons and a bunch of upgrades for a game you've probably finished anyway, so it's not a particularly good offer, quite frankly, but it hasn't stopped it from climbing to the top of the Steam sale charts. Well, considering this was a chart that until yesterday had Citadels in the top 10, I am not entirely surprised by this behavior. Ubisoft's title A Mighty Quest for Epic Loot is currently in closed beta, available for buy-in if you happen to purchase one of the pre-order packs. However, its Update 15 patch introduced a rather sweeping set of monetization changes that caused a degree of consternation among certain players. This was widely reported as a pay-to-win scheme, where the game would allow you to purchase any upgrade, building, or creature in the game for a limited number of blings, the premium currency within the title. The developers of the game issued a statement that said, "As many of you have noticed, we recently made some changes on how and where we let players spend the game's premium currency blings. The reaction has been rather major and instantaneous. Many of you have said that this change has affected the game to a point of causing it major harm. A lot of you feel that the game has become pay to win or imbalanced, and this is not something that we think is acceptable. We're here today to let you know that we've heard your concerns and are acting on them immediately. We realize that letting players purchase machinery upgrades went too far in what we think feels fair to monetize. We are hereby rolling back the major premium currency mechanic changes, which will arrive in-game in an upcoming maintenance." Alright, well, I caused a bit of this. Probably most of it, I've got to say. But I certainly don't feel bad about it. The discussion really was centered around what exactly pay-to-win really means. The problem with the term pay-to-win is that it's extremely vague, and it also varies depending on the kind of game and the kind of business model that's being used, yeah? The classic sense of pay-to-win is very different from what we currently see as pay-to-win, and it also means different things to different people. Some people find certain kinds of monetization acceptable, some people don't. And as a direct result, you will have arguments on this particular subject. And it's one of the emerging problems with the dominance of free-to-play business models, and it's probably only going to get worse. In the case of Mighty Quest, I felt that the situation allowed you to buy so much that it basically made half the game irrelevant. And as much as people might argue, well, that's not really pay to win, I would argue that it is, simply because it takes away a core synergy within the game. For those who don't understand, what you're supposed to be doing in the game is building up your own dungeon and attacking other people's dungeons to get the currency to do so. When you take that out of the game, you take away one of the main reasons for actually raiding people's dungeons in the first place, which makes the whole game less fun for everybody because people aren't bothering to go into that wonderfully crafted dungeon that you made. It also means that you have the ability to completely optimize your dungeon, whereas non-paying players do not have that kind of luxury. The game works on a castle level system, which is supposed to calculate your castle based on the amount of upgrades and things that you have, but it's not necessarily accurate. It's also quite strange because the number of traps that you have in your dungeon doesn't seem to affect your castle level in any way. It's a kind of a weird system, really. And you can debate whether or not it's pay to win till the end of time, but as far as I'm concerned, at no point in a game like that should you ever be saying to people, yeah, you don't really have to play it, you can just buy everything. I think that's unnecessarily predatory, and I also feel that you sacrifice the integrity of your game and what you really want people to be doing. If you want people to be raiding people's castles, then don't give them an alternative to not do that, because people will take the path of least resistance when they can. And when the game is dependent upon people raiding your castle and you creating a better castle to make it more difficult and also making money from the fact that they died in it and so on and so forth, then you don't want to sabotage that ecosystem. That's a really bad idea. Thankfully, the game was in beta and still is, and I've said it time and again, beta is beta. Some people disagree with me on that one. They claim that once you start charging for in-game microtransactions, once you open a store, you essentially bring your game out of beta. I really disagree, honestly. I feel that if you label your game beta and you limit the access in some way, then you can be forgiven for a lot of the mistakes. As soon as you launch, then that little safety bubble that you have goes entirely out of the window. You are held accountable. As is demonstrated here, a major change has been made during beta. And honestly, if you don't want to play games that are in beta, then don't. They're clearly labeled as that. If you choose to spend money in a beta product, then as far as I'm concerned, you are entirely responsible for that decision. You knew that the game wasn't done. You knew the game would be subject to potentially sweeping changes. If you decided to invest in it regardless, that's on you. Following the self-publishing announcement from Microsoft regarding the Xbox One, a number of developers have posted their reactions. So We'll have a bit of a read of them, courtesy of VG247, who got their reactions in the first place. Brian Fargo had the following to say on it. Microsoft has been locked into a retail mindset for some time, and up until now, you needed to be a boxed games publisher in order to be on Xbox Live Arcade. Every entertainment industry has moved over towards a more open model in which having a rich and diverse selection of content is a killer app in itself. Every indie deserves a shot at the same audience as the big guys. Fair assessment, really. The interesting follow-up, though, comes from Hello Games, and they pointed out that the idea that you can use your Xbox One as a development kit is similar to what you could do with the 360. You could use it to develop stuff for the Xbox Live indie section, yeah? That's exactly the same, and you could self-publish on there. The problem, they say, is that Microsoft didn't properly support that, so it kind of became a wasteland. They claim that it only works if Microsoft promotes self-published games equally with their own, and with those of big publishers like EA or Ubisoft. Bossa Studios, the creators of Surgeon Simulator 2013, pointed out some interesting practical ideas. The notion that digital stores waste shelf space by offering to sell you games that you already own, for instance. And these are the kind of things that need to be dealt with if self-publishing is to be successful and fair exposure is to be properly given to a wide range of different titles. So what's the common theme? Well, the common theme is visibility. It's really as simple as that. If you publish on a platform like that and you do it without a major marketing budget, so basically if you're not EA, Ubisoft, or Activision, and you do so while everyone else is trying to do the same thing, your title can be very easily buried. This is exactly what happens on iOS. There's very little curation whatsoever, there's a huge amount of titles coming out on a daily basis, and as a direct result, you often have to strike it lucky in order to actually be successful, or you need to be part of an existing franchise. You need to be releasing the same damn game over and over and over again. Xbox Live Indie had a very similar problem. Visibility was a real issue with that. I mean, some people described Xbox Live Indie as the ghetto on Xbox Live, and yeah, they're probably right, in the sense that even if you do excel in there, you can't really escape anyway, so it doesn't make much of a difference. You're pretty much drowned in bad games, and it's extremely hard to make any headway whatsoever. And that system sucked, and I don't know of a single developer that said, yeah, you know, Xbox Live Indie's implementation was amazing. In the case of Microsoft, they basically had a two-tiered system. They had Xbox Live Arcade, which actually got publicity and actually got visibility. And then it had Xbox Live Indie, which is where everything else was basically dumped and left to fend for itself. That's got to change. The question is, how do you do it? This is a tricky one, isn't it? But I think I actually have a solution. Yeah, I know, it's weird, isn't it? Usually I just complain about everything. I think that what needs to be done in the next gen, which makes more sense considering that we are moving towards digital only at this point, is a huge focus on a recommendation engine. It has got to be done. This is the kind of thing that Netflix does, yeah? You realize what Netflix does when you go on there. It has a recommendation engine based on what you've watched. It can figure out the kind of things that you might want to see. Sometimes it's wrong, but a lot of the times it's right. And it's kind of required in order to actually browse through their massive library. I mean, it's impossible to find stuff by just looking around, really, unless you know specifically what you're looking for, right? Now, I've got to say, gaming so far has flat out failed to do that, in every respect. All the big platforms have failed to do recommendations in a good way. Steam just doesn't have one at all, which is insane when you think about it. I want to play games that are like the games that I enjoy. How will I find that? Well, let's go to genres. Oh wait, these genres are way too wide. What is adventure? What is action? Action is not a genre. Indie, according to this, is a genre. It's not a genre. It doesn't make any sense. It's a publishing model. Why would you call that a genre? If I look into indie, I find Cannon Brawl, Realms of Arcania, Skulls of the Shogun, Castle Storm, Shadowrun Returns. That's like 5 different genres all thrown in there. No, here's the way that you get around having too many games on the platform, so you reduce visibility for each one individually. You have that recommendation engine. And the funny thing is, you have the ability to do just that. You've got an amazing amount of data to work with, especially on Steam. Yeah, let's take Steam as an example. You could do this on any platform, but let's take Steam. Steam knows exactly where you are in any given game at any time. It knows exactly how long you've played, it knows how long the sessions were, and it is well aware of your preferences, because it can look at your library to figure that out. Based on that information, it could very easily recommend you games. Does it? Not at all. Absolutely not. And in fact, browsing the Steam store is a rather annoying experience. If you don't know what you're looking for, and it's not in the new releases or top sellers list, then good luck actually finding it. As an average consumer, I would absolutely love Steam to look at my library, say, huh, you played 85 hours of XCOM. So on that basis, we recommend this. And not just do that, you can go even further. It's not about how long you've necessarily played, it's also about where you got to and what you achieved, yeah? If you achieved something ridiculous within that game time, you got a very hard achievement that actually takes a good amount of dedication or indicates a very specific kind of gamer, then you can tailor that recommendation on that basis. You can significantly reduce the problem of overstocked digital shelves where individual exposure is at a premium by having something like that. That to me seems like the way forward. That's how you get around the problem of huge amounts of games going on a service, and you don't have to be so strict with curation. You don't have to say, oh, well, we can't let too many games on because then this happens. No, you let the recommendation engine handle that stuff. So that to me seems like it would work. It sounds like it'll also be very complicated to make, but I think that's the direction that we need to be going in. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw a great deal of that functionality heading your way. We already heard hints of it with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One anyway, so I think that that's where we're going, and that's a good place. I hope that Steam gets something like that. And finally, the new Humble Bundle is out, although this time it is decidedly not indie. This is the Humble Deep Silver Bundle, which is currently available for the next 13 or so days, and includes Saints Row the Third, Saints Row 2, Risen 2 Dark Waters, Sacred 2 Gold, and if you pay more than the average, you will get Dead Rising Game of the Year Edition as well as Saints Row 3, the full package, which includes all the DLC. Interestingly enough, they're also offering for $25 or more Dead Island Riptide, which is the newest game on that list, and that is about a 37% discount on the usual recommended retail price. So far, the average purchase price has been $4.63, with the highest only being $50, which is fairly rare considering the Humble Bundle usually receives rather large donations when it is supporting indie games. In this case, it would seem that that is not happening, and it also gives the option to give the entire amount directly to charity if you so desire. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? This is not the first time that we have seen a major publisher get on top of this one. The most obvious example would be the THQ bundle. As they were going under, they put all their games up on there and said, hey, pay what you want for this. And we also had, I believe, an EA-driven one some time ago that had Shank in it, as well as a couple of other titles that were kind of indie, but they were published by EA. So it's definitely not the first time. What's interesting about it is that it has caused a bit of controversy, kind of like the last time. The first complaint that keeps getting leveled at this is that, well, that's not indie, this is against the spirit of the bundle. Secondly, it's also not DRM free. And thirdly, this is only available for PC. It is not, in fact, available for Linux or Mac in the usual way. This actually, as a direct result, seems to be driving the overall price down, considering that both Mac and Linux gamers tend to give a larger amount to the Humble Bundle every time a bundle of compatible games is released. Now, I have to wonder, really, if it's actually a good idea to do things this way. Does it dilute the brand? I think it kind of does, honestly, because I think if you were to look at the way the THQ sale went versus how a regular Humble sale went, then you can very clearly see that there's a difference in audience and a difference in desire from that audience. Then if you look at the top contributors, for instance, you see that you don't have those big payments. You don't have those guys, it's like, here's a bunch of money. In fact, the top one that just came up as I was recording this is Linux Gamers Love Ports, $613. Now, apparently this is paying $613 to say, oi, this isn't a bunch of Linux games, why are you doing this? Seems like a rather odd way of actually getting the point across, but hey, there you go. Of course, these games are not available for Linux, I'm afraid. I guess it's just saying, you know what would be really good? Hey, if you offered Linux ports, you get a lot more money. And frankly, you're probably right in that respect. I think what annoys me most about this bundle is not that it exists. I'm actually totally fine with that, especially considering you have the option to give fully to charity. It would, of course, be nice if there were more than 2 charities available. I think the American Red Cross does a lot of good work. I've said time and again that I think you can donate to any charity, and the act itself should not be questioned or held to account, but I feel that Child's Play doesn't perhaps do as much good as other organizations. Regardless, that's not my call. What you do with your charitable giving is entirely up to you, but it would be nice to have a couple of other choices. I think the biggest problem I've got with it, actually, is that it really screws over the Humble Weekly sale. Now, this is an actual indie bundle, funnily enough. This week, this is a bunch of games by Positech. This is about to be off sale by the time that you see this video, I'm afraid. And that includes Democracy 2, Kudos 2, Gratuitous Tank Battles, and Gratuitous Space Battles. This guy is a legitimate indie dev. He's actually a one-man band operation. And honestly, I think if that had been a Humble bundle instead of the Humble Weekly sale, it would have got way more support, particularly if they'd been able to toss in something else. And, you know, there are a couple of other things. There were some opportunities there, I feel, but it seems like that this is a real bundle, a real indie bundle, and yet there's only been 32,000 purchases of this thing in 2 weeks. Whereas, of course, with the Deep Silver bundle, a couple of hours into it, it's already sold 60,000 copies because it's a legit Humble bundle. I think maybe it is a little bit of misuse of the brand, honestly. I don't really have too much of a problem with it because at the end of the day, they can do whatever they want, but I think that in the long run, if they keep doing stuff like this, they may expend that goodwill and actually lose a lot of the clout that they had in the first place, which would be a great shame because the Humble Bundle has helped out a lot of indie devs in a big way, and it's been a viable form of selling your title and making a huge windfall of cash, which I think is a very worthwhile thing. If you keep doing this and say, hey, here's a bunch of AAAs that are old for a cheap price, then yeah, I think people will become less interested in it because a lot of the money that was being thrown at Humble Bundles was done so in the knowledge that it was supporting devs that kinda needed it. Deep Silver, on the other hand, very clearly does not need it. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, I would like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Let's stay on the heavy theme, shall we? And what better than Sixto sounds in that respect? Generally speaking, you're not going to find guitar-driven remixes better than this. So this is from a game called Tales of Symphonia. Of course, you should be aware of that, a rather famous JRPG series. The name of the track is Dawn of the New World, Go the Distance. The original track it was based on was simply entitled I'll Go, and this was part of an album called Summoning of Spirits, an arrangement of music from Tales of Fantasia and Tales of Symphonia. You can download the entire thing over on ocremix.org. Enjoy. We'll see you next time.